Trump will be the American president that lost India, or more accurately, that chased India away.
The United States and India, two democracies with intertwined destinies in the Indo Pacific, are facing what may be the most volatile stretch in their partnership yet. At the heart of the storm, President Donald Trump.
And then what happened? Flush, flush, flush down the toilet, the capital that Americans have built over decades in service of Trump's personal grievances.
The US president has not just rattled trade and tariffs, but has taken aim at India's visa regimes, slapped unprecedented duties, and questioned New Delhi's strategic choices in a way that has both Democrats and Republicans in Washington sounding alarms. At a recent congressional hearing, Representative Sidney Kimblogger-Dove didn't mince words, warning that Trump could become the president who lost India. The fact of the matter is that India and Russia have always been friends and would never give up on each other. But there is panic in America. Americans are rattled and they're asking, is Washington's aggressive stance risking the drift of India toward Russia and China, fundamentally reshaping the balance of power in South Asia? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Trump's policies have introduced unpredictability that threatens decades of strategic discipline. The US-India relationship, nurtured over decades, was handed to him at a peak, with both countries aligned on defense, AI, energy, and space initiatives. Yet, the imposition of 50% tariffs on Indian goods, including a 25% penalty over Russian oil, has strained this once smooth trajectory. Congress warned that these punitive measures, framed as personal grievances or retaliatory gestures, risk flushing hard-earned diplomatic capital down the drain. How long before New Delhi interprets this not as discipline but as coercion and reorients itself toward Moscow and Beijing? The tariffs are not abstract. They target real sectors: agriculture, textiles, gems, jewelry, where India has been a global leader. Trump's threats over rice, claiming India is dumping cheap imports, ignore the nuances of global trade. India is a top global rice producer and exporter, shipping 150 million tons annually, while the US produces only 7.05 million tons. Premium basmati imports from India, priced higher than domestic US rice, contradict dumping claims. The reality is stark. Trump's rhetoric misreads the market, turning trade enforcement into a blunt instrument that risks alienating a partner critical for regional stability. Is this aggressive posture driving India closer to the very nations Washington sees as rivals and adversaries? The H1b Visa regime has become another flashpoint. In September 2025, Trump enacted a staggering $100,000 one-time fee for new H1b visas, targeting Indian professionals who comprise 70 to 75% of recipients. Lawmakers like Pramila Jayapal, a Democrat who might not like Prime Minister Modi or even President Trump, warned that this move not only jeopardizes Indian talent in American innovation hubs, but also undermines social cohesion, given Indian Americans' role in Fortune 500 companies and research leadership. Disruption in the visa bridge threatens US competitiveness and risks driving top Indian professionals to countries more welcoming of global talent. Is Washington's America First approach inadvertently pushing India to hedge its bet with other global powers?
We also are facing challenges around tariffs, both here in the United States and in India. These tariffs are damaging India's economy and also hurting American businesses and consumers. Just last week, I heard from a fifth-generation family-owned company in Washington state that relies on agricultural products from India that can't be sourced at scale in the United States. They told me that these tariffs are the greatest threat to their business in over 120 years, and they're looking at either downsizing or offshoring their production to meet increased costs. Meanwhile, this president has threatened people-to-people ties by shutting down legal pathways to immigrate, reminiscent of a legacy of discriminatory quotas that made it extremely difficult for Indians to immigrate in the first place. As the only member of Congress to have been on both a student visa and an H1b visa, I deeply understand the harms of those policies and am committed to making sure that we continue to provide strong legal pathways for people to come to this country from India as well as around the world. I've also been concerned about and just met with this morning a coalition of groups that's been working on anti-Indian hate that has been rising in the United States, and I've been hearing about from my own constituents. I just want to make the point that Indian Americans are extremely important to our economy, an integral part of our society, running major Fortune 500 companies as well as startups and leading cutting-edge research to save lives.
Trump's ire is not limited to visas and tariffs. His public focus on India's Russian oil purchases, a 50% tariff linked directly to Moscow, signals a willingness to penalize India for foreign policy choices Washington disagrees with. Lawmakers like Ami Bera of the Democratic Party emphasize that India's ties with Russia can be leveraged positively in the Ukraine conflict, not punished. Yet, Trump's punitive measures, coupled with criticism of BRICS participation, signal to New Delhi that its strategic autonomy is under siege, threatening a tilt toward a multipolar alignment that sidesteps the US.
Collaboration. I guess the last question I would have is, or it's probably a statement. Yes, we do have some concerns about India's closeness with Russia, but just based on historic norms, that's to be expected. What I would like to encourage India to do is the president sincerely does want to find a cessation to the conflict in Ukraine. India can play a unique role given their lines of communication with the Russians, given their ability to understand the Russians, to bring them to the table. I would think the president would look at that very favorably. I think this is a time for India that wants to take a bigger role on the global stage to, step up to the stage and use your father's a very seasoned diplomat who I've got to know. I think he's very capable of doing this. And then when this conflict ends, we are going to have to work together to figure out how do we bring Russia back into the fold? What does that look like? So I think India can play a big role there.
The Tianjin SCO summit photo showing Modi with Putin and Xi became a symbolic flashpoint. Trump's reaction on Truth Social, calling it a snub and declaring the US lost India, underscores how US policy is being interpreted abroad. For India, the optics were about strategic autonomy, signaling engagement with global powers while maintaining independence from coercion. Yet in Washington, it looked like a direct consequence of Trump's tariff tyranny and visa aggression. Is the US strategy backfiring, accelerating India's closer alignment with Russia and China, precisely the scenario lawmakers feared? Congressional testimony highlighted concern. Democrats and Republicans alike recognized the defining role of India in a free Indo Pacific. Bill Huizenga of the Republican Party stressed that the US-India partnership is central to countering authoritarianism, ensuring resilient supply chains, and shaping regional rules. Yet, Trump administration's unilateral measures threaten this very partnership, creating friction where coordination is essential. Could a personal vendetta against a photo or a trade grievance risk unraveling the 21st century strategic fabric that binds the two nations?
The US-India relationship is no longer just important, it is a defining relationship of the 21st century. If America wants a free Indo-Pacific, resilient supply chains, and a world where democracy, not authoritarianism, sets the rules, then our partnership with India is critical. While the partnership has been nuanced since India gained independence in 1947 and India's non-alignment posture shaped its strategic identity, the United States and the Republic of India share a common vision of a free, open, and secure Indo-Pacific rooted in democratic values and a deep desire for freedom. That's why every American administration, Republican and Democrat, has strengthened ties, or certainly at least attempted to, making clear that the United States does not see India as a temporary or transactional partner. Still, we must view this moment with clear eyes. President Putin's warm visit to India last week and India's participation in China's Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit this September raised some understandable concerns. At the same time, India has agreed to purchase more American energy, thereby reducing significantly its reliance on Russia. Today, U.S.-India cooperation spans defense, technology, counterterrorism, and trade. Defense ties have never been stronger. India participates in the Quad along with our allies Japan and Australia. Additionally, our militaries conduct joint exercises from the Indian Ocean to Rajasthan and transfer some of our most advanced defense technologies to deepen military-to-military trust and interoperability. The counterterrorism cooperation is equally significant. The LET and the TRF, the organizations responsible for the heinous attack in Palagram, were designated by the Trump administration as foreign terrorist organizations in July of 2025, reflecting our shared commitment to fighting terror wherever it occurs. This partnership is not only about security. People-to-people ties between our nations are extraordinary. More than 5 million Indian Americans contribute to the American economy. They serve in our military. They lead major companies. Meanwhile, American students, businesses, and tourists engage with India every year, strengthening our connection to one of the world's most vibrant democracies.
The rice issue epitomizes this miscalculation. U.S. imports of Indian rice are limited, focusing on premium aromatic varieties, not bulk staples. India supplied 263.9 million worth of rice in early 2025, dwarfed by U.S. exports and Thai rice imports. Imposing tariffs here is not about protecting domestic farmers. It's a symbolic gesture misaligned with economic reality. Even the $12 billion U.S. farm aid package accompanying rice threats signals a political theater rather than strategic trade management. Is Trump administration creating the perception of a threat while ignoring the actual economics? Tariffs on Indian goods and Russian oil are part of a broader pattern. Trump publicly criticized U.S. firms manufacturing in India, warned of rice and other agricultural tariffs, and scrutinized visa approvals. The combination of economic pressure and personal grievances undermines the foundations of trust built over 25 years, risking India's pivot to alternative partners. Modi's Make in India initiative, intended to enhance domestic capacity, now also serves as a hedge against unpredictable U.S. policy. Are America's short-term tactics weakening long-term strategic influence in South Asia? The H1b fee hike is not just a visa issue. It signals a broader cultural misalignment. Indian professionals contribute to cutting-edge research, medical innovation, and technology infrastructure in the U.S. Trump's $100,000 fee rebukes these contributions, generating uncertainty and frustration among a community critical to American innovation. Jayapal warned that anti-India rhetoric, even indirectly targeting Indian Americans, threatens social cohesion. Could Trump's personal focus on domestic optics and Nobel Peace Prize ambitions inadvertently destabilize both innovation pipelines and domestic goodwill? Trade delegations attempted to smooth frictions, visiting India on the 10th and 11th of December amid stalled market access talks. Yet even as rhetoric softened, the underlying issues, tariffs, visa threats, criticism of Russian energy ties, remain unresolved. Lawmakers emphasize that unpredictability risks undermining U.S. influence, allowing BRICS and other multipolar coalitions to gain traction, although that is a reality for India and for all other allies of India. Trump's insistence on reciprocity, framed as America first, clashes with India's strategic autonomy, creating tension in negotiations critical to Indo Pacific stability. Are these delays merely transactional, or do they represent a strategic drift with lasting consequences? India's role in global supply chains magnifies the stakes. Tariffs and immigration restrictions threaten sectors beyond agriculture, textiles, gems, jewelry, ready-made garments, where India is indeed a leader. Washington's leverage is limited. Indian exports to the US represent a small fraction of total trade, and premium pricing insulates producers from substantial disruption. The optics of punitive tariffs against a rising economic power, paired with visa fees, send a signal that the US is willing to risk alienating a strategic partner. Could this be perceived in New Delhi as a push toward alternative alliances with Russia and China? US lawmakers stress the strategic cost. Democrats highlight the personal nature of Trump's grievances over a Nobel Prize or a photo at the SEO summit, while Republicans underscore India's vital role in shaping a free Indo Pacific. Both converge on a warning: mishandling India risks eroding a pillar of US influence. The stakes go beyond trade, extending to defense cooperation, technological collaboration, and geopolitical balance in South Asia. Is Washington's internal political calculus sacrificing decades of alliance building for short-term optics? Trump's public commentary on rice imports reveals the transactional lens through which he views diplomacy. Claiming India dumps cheap rice ignores US net exporter status and the niche market dynamics of basmati. The narrative prioritizes optics over economics, creating a perception of aggression rather than partnership. Indian exporters remain resilient, targeting global markets from West Asia to West Africa, minimizing the impact of US tariffs. Could this misreading of market realities damage the credibility of US trade policy while strengthening India's resolve to diversify alliances? The Russian oil penalty adds another layer. Trump frames India's purchases as financing Moscow's Ukraine war, justifying punitive tariffs. Yet, India's engagement with Russia is long-standing, strategic, and aligned with broader regional stability. Lawmakers in the US stress that punitive measures risk pushing India closer to a multipolar alignment, diminishing US leverage in the Quad and the Indo Pacific. Modi's balancing act, maintaining relations with both Washington and Moscow, is a nuanced exercise Trump's policies fail to respect. Is the US inadvertently accelerating the very alliances it seeks to contain? Tariff escalation and trade tensions intersect with domestic political optics. Trump's claims of reciprocity and America first resonate with segments of US voters and farmers. Yet lawmakers warn of the strategic costs. Agricultural and tech sectors, Indian professionals, and US firms operating in India all face uncertainty. The long-term consequences of these policies may outlast political cycles, risking supply chain resilience, innovation partnerships, and regional stability. Could the immediate political benefits for Trump be outweighed by decades of strategic loss? The H1b Visa changes ripple beyond economics. Indian talent fuels US leadership in AI, medical research, space technologies, and energy innovation. By imposing a punitive fee, Trump risks not only alienating a key workforce, but signaling to India that US partnership comes at a personal cost. Lawmakers argue that this undermines America's competitive edge and could accelerate India's pivot toward partners less prone to unilateral disruptions. Is Washington prepared for the human capital and strategic costs of this approach? SEO summit's symbolism cannot be overstated. Modi's warm interactions with Putin and Xi at Tianjin underscored India's independent diplomacy. Trump's reaction, sarcastic posts claiming the US lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China, highlighted the administration's sensitivity to optics and personal affronts. For India, the event reinforced the importance of hedging and strategic autonomy. For the US, it raised alarm about drifting influence, accelerated by the very policies Trump used to assert leverage. Are these optics creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of alliance erosion? Congressional hearings made clear that bipartisan consensus is eroding over tactical US policies. Democrats emphasized long-term strategic implications of tariffs, visa restrictions, and diplomatic pressure. Republicans underscore India's centrality in maintaining a free Indo-Pacific. Both converge on one point: Mishandling the relationship risks opening space for adversaries. With Trump's actions perceived as coercive, is the United States sacrificing decades of strategic partnership for immediate political signaling? Trade disputes, immigration fees, and public criticism feed a narrative of US unpredictability. India, balancing economic growth, defense interests, and global influence, faces increasing incentives to engage with Russia and China as counterweights. The cumulative effect of tariffs, the H1b fee, and public criticism is a push-pull dynamic that could redefine South Asia's power architecture. Are these unilateral pressures achieving policy goals or merely catalyzing the shift lawmakers fear the most? US rice and agricultural policy further illustrate misalignment. India's exports focus on premium, niche markets, aromatic basmati varieties, far from mass market competition with US producers. Yet, Trump's rhetoric frames them as dumping, threatening retaliatory tariffs. Lawmakers note this misrepresentation undermines credibility while signaling to India that partnership carries hidden costs. Is Washington's strategy creating a perception problem worse than any economic impact? The interplay of trade, visas, and diplomacy paints a broader picture of US policy under Trump: reactive, personal, and short-sighted. US lawmakers warn that such unpredictability risks a drift away from an essential partner. India's autonomy in foreign policy, particularly in balancing ties with Russia and China, may be accelerated by Washington's unilateral measures. Is the United States prepared to accept the consequences of pushing a key ally into alternative strategic arrangements? Trump's pattern of using tariffs as leverage from Russian oil to rice parallels his approach to visas and public criticism. The cumulative effect: alienating Indian professionals, imposing high duties, and framing diplomatic gestures as affronts, creates a feedback loop. India responds with strategic autonomy, diversification, and a very strong message that Russia will always remain a partner. Lawmakers warn that without recalibration, US influence in the Indo Pacific may weaken, supply chains could be disrupted, and China-Russia-India alignments strengthened. Are these the unintended outcomes of personal and transactional policy making? Thank you for watching Statecraft.